Dutch culture, and we'll learn a little bit more about that as we go along. I don't normally like to read directly from PowerPoint presentations, but in this case I'm going to because that's a lot to say. But this is about where we source a lot of our information. The heirloom healing Deitsch, or Pennsylvania German practice of Braucherei, also called powwow in English, and the related magical practice of Hexerei serve as tremendous folk resources for the heathen denomination of Urglaawe. Along the front line of folk medicine for the Deitsch people, Braucherei is pre-Christian at its core and features overlays from Gnostic, Judeo-Christian, and Lenape traditions. The practitioner communities also retain a large volume of oral lore in the form of myths, superstitions, charms, and the like. The Urglaawe movement arose from these living heathen traditions as well as from the wider age folk religion, which means that you go to church and do whatever the Lutherans or UCCs or whatever did, and then you go home and just, honor things you know. Urglaawe features the elements still living within the Deitsch culture, drawing much of its knowledge from Braucherei and Hexerei lore. The Urglaawe community is now working to make this knowledge more accessible to the Urglaawe community inside and outside of Pennsylvania. So, pretty much every culture that, every folk religion seems to have a tree somewhere featured as, the connection among its various realms. And we are definitely no exception to that. Our tree of life is actually complicated, vibrant, and actually has some things in it that I really haven't picked up in other cultures' traditions, but I also haven't studied them in depth enough to know. But so the cosmology plays a role in how we interpret things within our religion and within our culture. And so now we're going to talk about the Lewesbaam and its place in the forest of world trees. All right, a little depiction is over here. It's kind of funny, as we've been studying it over the years, you come to understand that the Westblätter and the Ostblätter actually hang down and cover the south leaves in many cases. Westblätter means western leaves, and Ostblätter means eastern leaves. So I'm going to start at the beginning here. This is the Nordblätter, or the northern leaves. Okay? In the middle here is what we call the Hohegagen, and that's like the highest realm. Then we have the, I'm going to say Himmelgagen on here. I don't think it's Himmelgagen. Südblätter is actually normally down a little lower. Himmelgagen is one of the realms, and this is where you keep all your stuff. This is here in the physical realm. Then we have Untergagen and Mittelgagen, but each section of leaves is also considered part of the realms. And we're going to go and discuss each one of them individually. Now, for the past actually 11 years, I have been doing numerous interviews with people who practice Braucherei, Hexerei, or part of the culture. Prior to me, my mentor did 8, and prior to her, her mentor did about 80. I just did interview number 150 last week, and so we've gotten a tremendous amount of lore out of these. And the Lewesbaam is something that comes up in virtually every interview that goes into anything related to cosmology. So it's widely known. And within people who identify as Hexerei practitioners, nearly every one of them cited a total of 9 realms on our tree. Within Braucherei practitioners, the number varied widely. And the number seemed to vary widely based on their religious identity. The ones who identified as Christian identified heaven, earth, and hell. So they tended to have 3. But 9 was still the plurality. And then we had 12, which actually 12 was represented on a hex sign. There's one hex sign out there called the Tree of Life that has little signs on each of the realms. That one's fairly common because of that. And then we had the highest number I got was 20. And but 9 was by far the most common number of realms on our whole tree. So where did the world tree come from? Well, those of you who are familiar with Norse lore know that they have a pretty intact creation myth. Whether that myth is really ancient or came up later, I don't know. But we actually have elements of that creation myth within our own lore. It's not 100% complete, and actually, quite honestly, there's still things I have to work out based on some of those interviews. But we do believe that there was primal fire and primal ice in existence to begin with, and like the great void in between the two. That much we do have. But what drew those two together? What drew the sparks from the primal fire to melt to thaw the ice to begin to form existence around it? And we end up with the force of Vort. Vort, though, is the cognate of the Anglo-Saxon word weird, which many folks here may or may not know is a concept kind of similar to karma in some ways, where your actions and the actions of those around you and everything influence the future. And the past is pretty much set, but the future can change based on your actions. The big thing that comes up within our lore is that there's a very good chance that the force of Vort is conscious. Okay, which means that the divine creator force is a conscious entity. I've just quite a few interviews that also say no, it's not. It's an unconscious force, but it still exists, like gravity. It still exists. But if it is conscious, actually even if it's unconscious, it is seen kind of as a maker force or a maker being, potentially a deity, and everything in creation answers to it, even the gods. The gods are not above the force of Vort, with the possible exception of Freid. You guys might know her better as Frigg. But it is believed that that force is what set into motion the melting of the sparks flying from the primal fire, from the primal fire, and thawing of the primal ice. From that, though, from the interaction of them, other elements were created. Okay? The source one is seen as spirit or Vort, but then we have absolute fire, which consists of 9 parts of fire and 0 parts of ice. We have primal ice, which consists of 0 parts of fire and 9 parts of ice. Then elements, in this case, we're talking metaphoric elements in a way. Time is the next element. That consists of 8 parts fire and 1 part ice. Then comes air, 7 parts fire, 2 parts ice. Water, 6.6 parts fire, 3 parts ice. Light, 5 parts fire, 4 parts ice. Yeast, which is interesting because that's that's an organism. 4 parts fire, 5 parts ice. Metal, 3 parts fire, 6 parts ice. Venom, 2 parts fire, 7 parts ice. Salt, 1 part fire, 8 parts ice. And then earth, or soil, or physical matter, like of other planets, the moon, rock, whatever, would be considered to be the interaction of all of them. And so we have an order of creation that some of it comes, our Hexerei lore varies from both Norse and from the German Hellenistic lore. We do know that there is a cow, but we don't have the name like they do in Scandinavian lore. But we do know that a cow existed, and from the cow arose the giants. And from the giants arose the gods, or the deities. And then, created by the gods, were first the dwarves and then the humans. This, by itself, is one of the most pivotal things. It differs from the Scandinavian lore widely, but we have various purposes, as believed in our lore, that we have missions that we're supposed to help the gods accomplish by retaining order in this realm. And if we fail at it, the gods may turn back to the dwarves. In other words, theoretically, the gods could give up on us. And that's a pivotal difference from Scandinavian lore, because in Scandinavian lore, if I remember correctly, the dwarves came from maggots on the giant Ymir's body under his arms or something. In this case, the dwarves, we see the dwarves as being, they're our cousins. The dwarves are actually related to us. Then we have this big missing piece. Which gods were actually responsible for assembling all this? This is where our Lord kind of craps out on us in a sense. But we have some hints from all the way back to Tacitus about Twisto and his son Manus Arman. It's quite possible that these are the deities that are responsible for the creation of the tree, and that Manus is responsible for giving life to humans. But whether it's Siu, you may know him as Tyr, and Twisto are the same god is unclear at best. But then we do know something. Allah is responsible for giving us reason and logic. And we also know that the breath of life comes to us from the god Vudan, which you may know as Odin. But all these other beings, where did they come from? And unfortunately, this is stuff that we're still exploring. We don't have enough information to make a valid call on that right now. But we do know that these other beings began to show up in different realms, and that along the way, much like if you ever had to deal with an aphid infestation on certain trees, you know, it may start in one part of the tree, but then it starts to spread all throughout the tree as the ants start to, you know, colonize and set farms of, you know, of their aphid milking production up across the tree. And so one group of hexerei practitioners referred to there being a diaspora of non-physical beings up and down the trunk of the world tree. Now, our tree of life, our Lewesbaam, is seen in 3 dimensions. And you know, if I were paper mache crafty, I actually probably would, you know, throw off like it. It's the leaves that have the dimensions. And you don't just see it as a flat image. We see the northern leaves being like a regular tree, like they just cover an entire 360-degree arc. Same with the southern leaves, and the western leaves and the eastern leaves hang over the sides. So the areas are the Himmelgegend, the highest area, the Himmelgegend, the heaven or sky area, as Hatzholz, the heartwood, the Untergegend, the under area, the Dunkelgegend, the dark area, the Nachtblätter, or the northern leaves, the Südblätter, or the southern leaves, Ostblätter, or the eastern leaves, and the Westblätter, the western leaves. Any questions so far? All right, so first we're going to talk about the Himmelgegend. All right? This is the home of the deities. Now, we actually have sometimes a spirited discussion, even within Urglaawe, about the deities. We have some references to there being two tribes of deities, much like is present in Scandinavian lore, with the names of the Ase and the Vane, and we even know in many cases which deities they may belong to. But we have just as many references to say, no, there never was a separation of these two tribes, and that separation was imported from the lore of the north. And I actually personally don't see it as actually mattering. To me, it doesn't matter whether one is an Ase or a Vane. I can still deal with all of them. But we know that there was a wall that surrounds the northern leaves. It was built by the gods, and within it there are many halls, including some like palaces of deities. There are forts or borike that keep that make it very difficult for giants to pass through. We know that Siu's court, or his Garik, is there. So that's the place of the deities own all things. We know that Woden's Hall is there. We don't actually know whether it's called Waldburg or not, but that's what the Germans tell us it is in German. And we do know that Fried also has a hall there, but we have no idea what the name of it is. There are entry points that are guarded, and we know that there are guardian deities, but we don't have any of their names. Invaders from the northern leaves must walk around. They must wait for the branches to touch a part of the tree that's lower than Hoagagan, because they cannot pass through. Hoagagan is very well defended against the dwellers of the northern leaves, which we will talk about again today. Himmelgagan. Home of the Elva. Okay? There's not just one native race of beings. There's a whole bunch of races. And we always say that one of these days when we have absolutely nothing better to do and lots of copious spare time, we're going to sit down and we're going to organize all these different types of elves, kobolds, brownies, nixie, all these things that we have turning up in our lore, and get to understand them. Like one of my favorite stories, and Victoria has come to enjoy this one too, is when I was interviewing people within the same group of Hexerei practitioners actually started getting into a heated argument over this thing they were calling a barn dwarf. Okay? Sorry, barn elf. And they were arguing over how it appeared to people. No, it appears as blue. No, it appears in red. Like there's just so much lore and so many of these little creatures that we haven't actually been able to ascertain where they all come from. But the funny thing is that these people were really taken it pretty seriously. I thought they were going to come to blows, but I'd never even heard of a barn dwarf outside. I'm sorry, barn elf outside of that. But they appear to be some sort of Heinzelmann or some sort of house elf that transferred itself to a barn. Now in Braucherei, this is also considered to be the realm to which spiritually evolved ancestors go after they pass. There's a belief among some practitioners of Braucherei, and I don't actually myself believe it, but I can understand where they got it from. Within we have a lunar zodiac. There are 12 signs of the lunar zodiac for the 12 new moons, plus in some years you have a 13th moon. It resets itself at the spring equinox every year. The first new moon after the spring equinox is the start of a new lunar year. And so you have the 12 of those, plus sometimes the 13th. And there's a belief in Braucherei that everybody will have at least 12 lives, and that in each life you will be born under one of those moon signs that will be different from all the other ones. Not in order necessarily, but you will experience life having been born under each of the moons, meaning that you'll be affected by all the dispositions and personality traits that are impacted by that moon. And then once that 12th moon comes, once you die after that 12th moon, you will go to Himmelgagan. But then they believe that there are others who have a 13th life that they will come and be born under that moon sign, and then they are to be the ones who instruct other people on how to practice Braucherei, how to keep traditions alive, etc., before they get to go to the Himmelgagan. But this is also where the matriarchal spirits, the Deset, or the Desir as they're known in Scandinavian lore, so they kind of go and they keep their eye on what's going on with their children, or all things down here in this realm. And this is where your fairy godmothers come from. The whole notion of fairy godmothers being these people who watch out over you after you pass away.
So in the Norse idiom, the Disir are presented as feminine consistently. Yes. Is that the case here?
It's not always. There actually is. But the lore is best reported as feminine. Okay. I know in the Norse they have the alfar for the males, but the males are there. It's just the females are just much better represented. German is a language that does separate by gender, but the funny thing about it is that it's also not quite as sexist as many other languages, in that a male being can be identified by a female noun. For instance, I call myself a hex, which is a feminine noun, even though I'm a male. And I don't go and call myself a hexer or anything. It's a hex. So technically, an Edis or an Edis could be male or female. but generally you see it. We also know that that realm is surrounded by a wall, and sap from the Himmelgegen oozes down into the Hotsholts and brings messages into our realm. And this is also the home, or some call it the spinning shop, of the Vorthexe, which people might know as the Norns. And so a lot is going on in this realm, a lot related directly to the realm in which we live. And while we do go to the gods for questions, concerns, whatever, anything we're asking for needs to go through there anyway, because that's the next realm up. And we are taught to really rely on our ancestors, or the people who are forebears, is the term I prefer, because it's not necessarily your blood ancestors, but your forebears, as much as possible, because they're the ones who have the most vested interest in our success. The gods care about us, certainly, but the ancestors, we are the descendants, we are a partial soul, rebirth, religion. We are literally our ancestors. So we have some concerns. It's sometimes best to approach them. But the Vorthexe, that's where your vort itself is being woven there. So what you're doing down here, that sap that's running down, there's messages going back up as well, usually by a groundhog in our case, not a squirrel. And we'll talk about that too. Any questions about that? Hotsholts. This is the heartwood, as I said, where you keep your stuff. This is the whole of the physical plane, the universe that we see, Venus, Mars, all of it. It's the point of contention between the deities and the Ris, otherwise known as the giants. We live in specifically a realm called a sub-realm, or a section of it called Mannheim or Mannheim, depending on which variant the Deitsch you speak. It is believed that this realm probably was, this comes from Tacitus, but it has been applied by Hexerei practitioners, that this realm was structured by Tuisco, and that his son, Manas, became the father of the human race. Who the mother is, we don't exactly know. But this is the Mannheim thing literally means the home of man. And some of the reasons that people draw this conclusion that he's the father of humanity is because the terms are related to each other. We are the whole of the physical realm. And that's one reason that we are very important to both the gods and the giants, because the giants try to take control of the physical realm, the gods are trying to retain control of the physical realm. But we are the physical beings. Any deity can manifest as physical, but we are by nature physical. And the dwarves are able to manifest as physical also, but the difference with them is that the size of their physical being compared to their mental size is out of balance. So when the gods created us, it is said that they created us with a more balanced stature, so we're able to control the physical environment around us better than the dwarves are. But again, if we fail to keep order in this realm, we end up sliding backwards. They turn back to the dwarves and try to attempt to have the dwarves take on our role of keeping order. So all animals and plants are part of the deity's order. All of them. And all of existence plays a role. Everything that we do here plays a role in the God's overarching plans. One of their plans is that by the end of this cosmic cycle, they want us to be where they were at the beginning of this cosmic cycle. And now it's time to interject it. There's a widespread belief among practitioners of Hexerei in particular that we are failing miserably at this. And but the failure is bad enough about just living, willy-nilly, not paying attention to what you're doing. The bigger issue is actually for religion directly. They want us to use our consciousness and want us to question things and want us to think about things, not have blind obedience to anything that we are told. And the dominant religions on the face of the earth today are all about being told what to do and following the dogma as it's presented, and not questioning, not even thinking about it. Submission, right, or not applying your consciousness to what is being told. You're living the way you're told to live, rather than applying your consciousness and trying to put it into what the best interest is. This causes a problem, because if once we stop applying our consciousness, it weakens the God's order. And then it makes it easier for the giants to come in and other forces of chaos, which we personify by the giants. The giants are a personification in many ways. And in our society, we actually have 4 big ones. Well, actually 3 big ones, and they kind of lead to the 4th one. One of the biggest problems we have in our society here in the United States is rootlessness, where people are not connected to one another. They don't have connections to anything. They don't have connections to their neighbors. They don't even know their neighbors. They don't want to know their neighbors. But then we also have ignorance, where you don't even know that you're not connected is bad enough, or you don't even know that you're not living consciously. And then we have apathy, where you don't even care. Those 3 things, pretty bad each individually, but put them together, and you got this whole thing called unenlightened self-interest, where you are just kind of skating through life, whatever happens, you don't care what damage you're doing, and then that leads to people not caring about their environment, not caring about whom they're harming, what they're harming, throwing things out of balance, and it just makes it easier for entire systems to collapse under them. And that's happening. Now, in different parts of the world, you'll have different problems featured. But I have to tell you that, in my experience, in 2 of the countries that are experiencing this rootlessness, ignorance, and apathy combination are the United States and Russia. And it's a shame, but it's something that we need to kind of work on. But as long as people are just being told to blindly obey whatever they're told from their religious leaders and not allowed to question anything around them, that's not good, because that actually turns religions that tell you not to apply your consciousness into forces of chaos. So, stop that for a minute. But now, beings from other realms often visit. We're right in the middle of everything. It's kind of like being, right in the middle of a major highway system. So that's why we run across all types of, non-physical beings from all over the place. Now, within our realm, we have certain spots that we strongly, within Pennsylvania Dutch country, we have spots that are considered to be a little bit closer to some of these interaction spots. Hexafeld, Hexabodic, and Hexakop, they all play significant roles in our mythology, because that's where the wild hunt first lands. First lands in Hexafeld, which is near Lancaster County, then Hexabodic, which is in Berks County, and Hexakop, which is the goddess Hulda's territory here in North America. And then the North Star that's the personification of the god Seal in our lore. And because he can keep his eye on Mannheim from up there. And everything we see when we look up spins around him, because that's where we're supposed to be taking our source of understanding and justice and right action from. Urglaawe. This is the underworld. It's toward the base of the World Trade. And the home of the goddess Bertha. This is where spirits are awaiting rebirth. So in our lore, we believe that when you die, you first go down into the Dunkelgegen, and you run across this thing called Hulda's Mill. And the mill crushes your soul into shreds. And then I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to that part of the realm. But this is where this is where the souls go when they're awaiting reconstruction for their next life. Now, or when they're first being born, like when a brand new spanking soul, never been born before. But now the thing about this is, most of us believe in partial soul rebirth. Not everybody does. Some people actually believe in full soul rebirth. But one of the things about partial soul rebirth is that if you are reborn, you are not the same person that you were before, because your soul it consists of at least 9 parts, and each one of those parts is unique. Your higher self may be the same, but it's attaching to different, new soul sections, plus the foliar, or Deitsch as some people call it, that it's not even really technically part of us. It is a companion to us and joins with us before we're born and goes through life and guides us as we're going through. That foliar may have been alive in millions of people's lives, so we gain knowledge from that part when it attaches to us. That's our Geva companion, our Gavo companion. So it's, because I once heard somebody say, well, if I'm going to be reborn again anyway, I may as well just do what I want to do. Well, but the thing is, each life is unique. Each life is precious, because each soul construct is unique. And plus that whole Vort thing, you're subject here to the actions that you've done before. And when you're born, part of your soul is what we call the Urglaawe, which is these primal layers that you set for yourself in your past life. It ends up being stuck to your higher self and ends up getting reborn onto the next life. So, sorry? Maxima Besser, you get always better, do the best that you always can. This is where the dwarves have ended up. There's many types of dwarves. Like, can't even think of how many there are. But this is also where we call the Urglaawe folk come from. And they're a particular type of dwarf that often comes into our realm, and they have their own king called their Urglaawe. Okay? And he is, the Urglaawe is he's a forest goblin in a sense, but he is the king, or some people actually say that he is a deity of the dwarves themselves. That the dwarves have their own pantheon within the pantheon of the larger tree. This is also where a character called Urglaawisch Lewesbaam, which he is a very baneful wight that comes into our realm and is particularly fond of seizing woodsamenos that have never been burned. Many of you may not have heard of woodsamon, but it's actually a strange Pennsylvania Dutch tradition that I actually really like and most people embrace, where you take the remnants of 1 year's plants. Around February, you gather them together and you build a scarecrow for the coming season. And ritualistically then, once the scarecrow is built, you actually go out into the western leaves, you actually do journey into it, and you invite the plant spirits, the elevated plant spirits, because they're EDC are also out there, to come and wake them up. And they come to the Bootsamon, wake him up, and make him active. And one of the promises that you have to make to your scarecrow is that you will burn him prior to Levenseal, which is October 31st. And otherwise he'll depart on the wild hunt, leaving behind this activated shell that any bad spirit can move into. And it's actually considered an extreme act of inhospitality not to burn the Bootsamon, because it's a breaking of an oath. But I bring this up a lot when I'm talking to non-heathen, non-pagan communities. It's like, how many people remember from your childhood being told about the Bootsamon is going to get you if you stay in bed, if you don't stay in bed on Christmas Eve, and all these Pennsylvania folks are, oh, I remember that. I used to be so scared of the Bootsamon. So the Urglaawisch Lewesbaam is the primary inhabitor of the shells of scarecrows that have not been burned. And there's all sorts of little folk tales about them running on the countryside, poisoning milk, or causing havoc, setting barns on fire, and things like that. And then another one that's supposed to be from there is Nixon, which they turn up in our realm mostly as mermaids, but spiritual mermaids. But they are a very slippery type of creature. They can be very helpful, but they can also be very trickstery. So we know that they all live, but their origins are all in the Urglaawe. Now the Dunkelgegen. This is probably the realm outside of our own that we have the most information about, because this is Hulla's realm. And within, Hulla is seen as the mother of the Deitsch nation, the Pennsylvania people. But there's a lot of folklore in Germany and here in the United States that surround her. Matter of fact, this thing right here, I brought this because this was made by an inreach inmate. He's actually has a life sentence, but he became interested in heathenry, and he was reading the stories about Hulla, and so he decided that he was going to make this. The entire base of it is actually is made from like popsicle sticks and a shoebox, and but that's his conception of Hulla's cottage down in Urglaawe. It's actually a really good piece of work. Now we know, both from Pennsylvania Dutch and from German lore, that there was an apple forest in that realm. As a matter of fact, in the Grimm's fairy tale about Frau Hulla, the apples are actually calling out. The apple trees are actually calling to be shaken to get the apples to fall out of them, and the heroine of the story, she engages in an act of hospitality and compassion by shaking it, and the bad one later on doesn't and is considered inhospitable. But the roots of all elder trees in this realm lead down to the Dunkelgegen, along within the trunk of the world tree. And the elderberry and elder is very highly and strongly associated with the goddess Hulla. We have the name of three springs. Vellendi, which means bubbling, Sprudendi, which means brimming, and Fließendi, which means flowing, and that's what these guys are here. And they go from the hot souls down to Dunkelgegen. In our myth, that's how the souls get from the souls of the departed in this realm, who do not go on the wild hunt, or at the end of the wild hunt, go down to the Dunkelgegen via those three springs. And there actually are these three little springs up at Hexerei Mountain. But it didn't actually dawn on me until yesterday that, the crossing over point for many Indo-European traditions has something to do with water, like the river Styx or whatever. And it just never even dawned on me that this is probably a survival of that sort of concept where you have to go into the river and the river takes you to your destination. Then we have a place called the Bolgees, which is called a flax meadow. Hulla is believed to have given obviously different cultures interpret it differently, but in our culture it is Hulla who gave flax to humans. And so flax is also strongly associated with her. And then we have the cottage, or Heisley, where she lives, and that's where the whole shaking her blanket causing snow comes from. And also in German lore, she's believed that the children who died before they're baptized go and stay at the cottage and live with her. And actually, there's a Twilight Zone episode like that too. I don't know if you ever saw it, but it's really like a Twilight episode. It's like, oh my God, when I'm watching it, it's whole, like these kids are in a pool and they drown in the pool and they wake up and they're in this realm with this woman with this German accent, and she's. If you haven't seen it, you gotta watch it. It's kind of amazing. Then we have what is called the Weibefeld, which means literally it means the field of women or the field of wives. And I'm still sorting through some of the lore on this one because apparently strange things are supposed to happen in that field. The belief that has been expressed to me by only a couple people is that the primary adherents of the goddess Hulla in the past tended to be women. And they were women who wore sickles on their feet because back then it was easier to harvest with the sickles on your feet. And so
You didn't have to stoop.
you didn't have to stoop. And it might have been on both feet, I don't know. but and you know but this is how the sickle became the symbol of Urglaawe. But that this Weiberfeld is where these ancient adherents of Holla ended up. That's a field for them that's dedicated to them, and that if you can actually get onto that field, you can get all sorts of wisdom and experiences from these original, handmaidens of Holla, who were human, but became like a Dreyer Eckhart became in her service after they passed away. It's actually, I really want to know more about that because this to me feels important, but we are only gathering what we can when we can.
I think I see where they can both be beside.
So they can be both
Because Paula is, again, she's not always home, so.
Well, she's
got to run the place.
She's usually off on the hunt.
Right.
Yeah. Someone's got to run it when she's away.
So, I mean, that theory, I kind of like that theory personally, so it's like but it's still a UPG kind of thing. We don't have enough supporting evidence of it, but for our purposes, it certainly makes sense. They both do. Oh, yes, or groundhog hole in our case, but we also know from our end of the wild hunt myth that Holla has, these ghosts of oxen that pull her carriage, and she takes the oxen off of her carriage, and she attaches them to a grist mill, not a water mill, but a grist mill called Selbrecher, which literally means the soul breaker, and that's what's that? Yeah, picture right here. You guys have it, maybe you can't see it. And here, and that just crushes the soul apart, and then out of the other end emerges the higher self, and they eventually go back up to the Urglaawe waiting to be reborn. But also in Urglaawe are some creepy characters. Okay, their Waldmann is particularly creepy to me because apparently in that apple forest there lurks this rather nasty being that can actually remove you from the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, but not in a good way. That when you're roaming around down in here, when you're passing through there, and this is kind of what lends me to think about the possibility that it has something to do with hospitality, because every single person I've ever heard in like a myth kind of thing where they didn't make it is because they didn't shake the apples. Like, so if you're ever asked to shake the apple, shake the apple. Take the bread out of the oven. But that's not enough to go on either. But the Waldmann apparently is a very hulking figure. Apparently he can actually be seen as very attractive, but he's easy to get. Let's share with the rest of the
big hulking attractive guy, I'd be screwed. I'd never be shaking apples.
He may be the one that's like.
Let's keep it.
He's a bit big. He's a distractor. Possibly he could be a.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
depending on, he could be terrifying to some. He could, he's.
Yeah, but apparently he can knock you out of the life, death, the reverse cycle.
Is he kind of like trouble?
No,
In that sense?
I don't get that
That
sense.
would be very attractive.
No, you know what sense I've always gotten?
I mean, I don't have that concept, but I could kind of leans in that.
Not really, because he's not evil.
He's not even.
He's not really seen as evil.
Well,
He's
the
just
devil-
seen more as like
I
dangerous.
should say stuff, which I get. In the original Torah sense, he's not evil.
No, I know, but it's not. I don't think it's a devil thing because I think it's more of a, like Jenny said, it's more of a distraction, more of a dangerous
I'm
thing.
taking notes for when I go down there, shake the apples, take the bread out, and just
Yes.
ignore it.
And who knows what other things they
He
have.
could get distracted if you're not focused on like tasks.
But whenever I read it, whenever I read Riding, story of Red Riding Hood, the real story, and the hunter comes up and chops chops them
Yeah.
and frees them for them. I sense that kind of person from
Okay.
him.
Well, he's a
Where he's
woodsman.
He's a woodsman. He's
a woodsman.
He's dangerous. He's dangerous, right? But he's not necessarily evil. I mean,
Right, so I wonder about whether he is what some may consider to be the guardian, who in some ways is, he is the thorny hedge that will keep out those not worthy, quotes, to enter into and connect with Paula directly and move forward because of whatever. I mean, and they will maybe have the chance to redeem themselves. I guess unless you're saying that is every time that the involvement is encountered, like bad things happen? I mean,
No.
anybody talks to, or do they?
There's like a remnant of a story that somebody told me once about somebody who the law won't let go, but she couldn't
It's
leave.
more like a tester.
I think like a guardian.
That would be a guardian.
So.
Like a tester of your soul, like who are you really, truly, and
Well, I think in a couple more discussion points, I think we may actually have another piece of information about that, so hold on to that for a second. Then we had the shadow beings, which may or may not actually be shadowy, but because it's dark down there, I guess it's hard to tell, but they are definite miscreants from our perspective. And they get loose in our realm quite a bit. Matter of fact, we saw one of them here last year. They actually, there are actual hexerei traps specifically for that meeting. Then we have sappers. This is Jenny's favorite. But sappers can be people, but sappers are also a class of beings that just sap your energy out. They just tap your life. But they get their name because they're sapping energy. But they also get their name because of the sap that I mentioned that runs from further up the tree, they consume that. So they come up into our realm looking to consume the energetic sap that's coming from him who gave it down to our realm. But they are more than happy to take the life force from everybody else. But their original home is said to be Urglaawe. Then we have the Misdoom. Alright? This is our version of Nostrum. This is where the people who really were miserable SOBs in life end up. It's not always, this is like almost like a purgatory thing. Because it's not always necessarily forever. But somewhere out there, and where it is, because I've talked to people about it, and it seems to be on the far side of the forest, is where the people who really don't deserve to be reborn anytime soon go. And this is what's making me think that maybe you just hit, we all just may have swerved upon something, is that the people who really fail with the Voltmon, that's where they end up.
he's a tester.
He gets you through it.
If you're right and good, even if you had your failings in your time, but if you're just really, excuse me, fuck up, it's like you're not going back in. You don't get to go back and put them.
Probably a big forest of poison ivy. No, but
A big forest of poison ivy, like ground wasps everywhere.
And the funny thing is, though, in all seriousness, I mean, for as much as we rely on the World Tree for some of the basic information, some of this is the first time that we've ever really talked about this, because it's always been so unclear, because a lot of this lore really has gotten cracked out over centuries of being under Judeo-Christian dominance and hegemony. But it's kind of cool that we actually have some of this information, and because now I think we're going to begin to explore this more. So let me move on to, now we're going to go scoot back up the tree and go visit the non-battle. The Northern Leaves. This is the home specifically of the Rye-Freaks, or the Frost Giants. They are enemies of the deities, even though they and the deities are related to each other, but they're the personifications of primal ice. We know the names of 3 of them specifically. Vaise Dax, Hate Fez, Poofste Poofs. They come twice a year. One time to bring the frost in, and the other time to try to keep spring from setting in. They play a role in our folklore. their names literally mean 13 Badger because he comes on the night of the 12th of May and the 12th of November. Then Fate Federer, which means, literally it means 14 fathers, but we actually think what it's supposed to mean is that the second B is supposed to be an F, but because of alliteration, they went with, they put the letter B, but it's pronounced the same anyway, but then it would be 14 quills or a porcupine. And then Fuchs is the 15 fox. And they, what they tell us is that their story, I'll get to in a minute, is that it takes 12 days to go from the Notblätter down to the Cotswolds, because they have to walk around Hoagig and then Himmelgig to get here. But Hola said to return on the night of April 30th, which is also May Day, and when she returns, that's when she and Bertha dance winter away. The winter dance, winter's gone, and so the giants learn of this. They come back to this realm. They leave their realm. 12 days later, they arrive to try to reset winter in. And then in November, Hola leaves on Amalita till October 31st, and they realize, oh, she's gone again. So November 1st is Amalita's day. It's actually November 1st. 12 days later, they come to bring winter in. And so that's it. It's metaphorically speaking, but the funny thing about it is that within the region we live, this is correct remarkably often. Because like the area where my cemetery is, every year except for one has had frost on the night of May 14th. And it's kind of, but then after that it's fine. And now that extends then to our plant lore, because on May 15th, that's the day you bring all your tenders out. Then we have the Frora, the frozen, okay? These are the ones that the plant spirits that the giants capture. We have in November, before King Frost sends his armies down to take, to set winter into this realm, Evergreager, our god of death, kills off the plants with his own frost first. The killing frost is actually him, so that they get back on the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. But if the frost giants get them first, they take them with them, removing them from the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And this can apply to people too. It can apply to any living being. And they are now stuck in the Notblätter, and they're not getting out of there anytime soon. So it removes souls from the equation. The ones who have been taken by the frost giants are called the Frora. It's not let it go, let it go. Then the Urglaawe, the southern leaves. This one is pretty much like probably the most difficult to approach. Okay, we do know some things here. We have the Fieries, or the fire giants. It's probably the least safe place on the entire tree. Personification of primal fire. Just like the Rifries, they're enemies of the deities, but the thing is that they and the Rifries don't get along either. So the two of them don't like it much at all. Then here we have the Parante. This is the incinerated. These are the ones that the fire giants capture. Fire giants capture souls, they take them up there and burn them to shreds. Okay? That's a scary thought. Now, both the fire giants and the frost giants want this realm because it destabilizes the gods. This realm is the center of everything. This is, we are the physical beings. We were created as physical beings to control the physical realm. These ethereal or non-physical beings cannot control it the same way we can, so they want to destroy it. They want to either control it or destroy it. So there's like this cosmic battle going on among these forces of chaos, the differing forces. And should they ever actually unite with each other, we're screwed. Urglaawe. It's called in Braucherei the place of magic. Okay? Sounds really cool. The place of magic. But what this really is this is the great repository of mega or life force energy. Okay? This is the place of like supreme healing energy. it's home. It's where it ended up after creation. Okay? So this means this is also possibly where the word itself lives, even though you would think it might be intimidating. But it's the home of, this is where the hall or the home of the vice deputy for hours. The white-haired woman is a goddess known, as far as I know, only to Pennsylvania German culture, with the possible exception that she may be known as Helith among the Anglo-Saxons. Okay? She is a deity of supreme healing. If you are doing Braucherei work, or Hexerei work for that matter, as she appears to you, you literally, like your entire consciousness is, for a moment, just white, like just bright and white. And she can bowl you over, but her name literally means the white-haired woman, because everything about her is white, but particularly it's noticeable is her hair. She's young looking, but she's very bright and white. Now the whole realm is like that. The whole realm is said to be very bright, like a glowing ball. And in my personal experience, I have journeyed to that one, and that's true. Now this may be where the kobolds come from. And this is a very odd thing, because most kobolds are not necessarily seen as being like, but they are like beings. And at least some of them, not necessarily all that we call kobolds. But a lot of creatures that we consider to be very bright tend to come from the ocean realm. And it's a mystifying realm. It's kind of cool, but it's almost so much energy that it's almost overwhelming. Then we have your favorite line, the Urglaawe, the western leaves. Okay. Before I go into that again, I think I commented on this earlier. Generally, the western leaves and the eastern leaves tend to hang down lower. And the western leaves are said to be the closest to the trunk of the tree in our realm. And so that they, with cosmic wind concepts, they actually blow up against the side of the tree. So the western leaves touch upon our realm often. And that's like times like Groundhog Day. It's not like when we say the male is closer, for us it's the branches are closer, the branches are touching. This is, to me, is the one I can go to. I can step into this without even thinking now. And sometimes I found myself there when other people were talking about meditation, I'll suddenly find myself there. This is the most traveled to spot in terms of journey. It's actually Grand Central Station. Because, while we are traveling, people who do journey work are journeying. When we're journeying, we're not the only ones who are doing it. Kobolds journey, elves journey, plant spirits journey. And this place is easily accessible from the trunk of the tree, so this has kind of become the meeting place. It is the journeying point for Braucherei and Hexerei. It's the first place that people learn to go. Matter of fact, our main prayer actually says it, where we're going to the western leaves. Now, evolved spirits for other beings from hot souls also end up there. That's where the plant spirits often end up. And plant spirits are unlike ours. Plant spirits can, when you have a plant and you cut the plant, that spirit is still in the plant even when it's dry. It's just dormant, but it's still, that's where it has its medicinal healing from. I'm going to harken back to the order of creation. There is a syncretic era poem, kind of not really a poem, but myth, it's in German lore, that tells us a bit about how people used to view the creation of humanity and what it came from. And most of the sections of it refer to us being built from plants. Like the stems are our veins. And this is one of the reasons that it is believed in Braucherei that plants can heal us so much is because we are of them. That plants and we are related to each other, even if our physical forms are very different. We were constructed from them. So since we were constructed from them, the power to heal comes from them. And so that is why we do so much of this conversing back and forth. That's why the Butzaman is so important. It's because it's all a reflection of this relationship between humanity and animals to plants. Okay, so many plant and animal deities may live there. This is a different one. Okay, we have enough inklings in both Braucherei and Hexerei to indicate that plants have their own gods, and that the plant spirits have their own gods. We have like the wheat king, the wheat. They are actually maybe the deities that are overseeing the ongoing evolution of the plants, much like our gods are watching out over the ongoing evolution of us. It's still not 100% certain, but we have enough of it to come up, and like all the grains have grain gods, and that's certainly an interesting concept. And then there is believed to be like a wind that blows through these trees and keeps the branches moving. So then one day I had an interview that was particularly enlightening, and since then I've come across others, still not said it quite as well as she did. Okay. She said, well, you know that this is the only little tree. That, most trees just don't grow by themselves. So there's usually other trees around. It's a forest of trees. This is just, we only see our little tree. But there's a whole bunch of other ones out there. She said, remember, trees are living beings. Sometimes branches break off, but new branches grow. She said, someday it may be the middle of our tree that dies, and everything above it may tip down. And this is one right here, the roots of the Dunkelgegen touch other trees' roots. And it is believed that from Dunkelgegen, you can cross over to other trees, and quite possibly this may be concepts related to other pantheons, the multiverse, quantum, phys, everything. But even this line itself, it's like a week or two ago, I read about how their science is showing that plants of different species and everything can talk to each other through their roots. I think our ancestors were aware of this already, just maybe not in so scientific of a term. But the whole concept of a multiverse, like we look at our tree as being a multiverse. And everybody's like, oh, science is kind of showing that there may be a multiverse. I'm like, yeah, but this is a multiverse on top of a multiverse. We're talking different dimensions now. And it doesn't fully surprise me that our ancestors may have been aware of this anyway, because they did not think so linearly and so uniformly about the existence of the world around them. That this moment in time may be happening again, it seems past us, but it may be reliving itself, infinitely behind us. Same with the space around us. And it blows my mind when I think about this stuff. Even after all these years, it still blows my mind. But yet I also take a lot of comfort in the fact that it blows my mind, because I don't want to know all the secrets. I want to keep learning secrets, but I don't want to know them all. Because once you know them all, what's the point of the question? And nobody knows it all. Well, maybe science. But then our messenger is the groundhog. Okay. But we actually see the imagery actually comes from a different perspective, but it's very similar to Ratatosk, which the North Sea is the squirrel that runs up and down the world tree, delivering insults between the eagle at the top and the serpent down below. But in our case, you ever see a groundhog burrow? It kind of takes the world tree and lays it flat, puts it in the ground. They have openings all over the place, and so the imagery is that the groundhog burrow opens up to all these different realms, and the groundhog brings a messenger. But groundhogs do climb trees. They don't have trouble getting down, but they do. And groundhogs aren't necessarily the most. They're bringing messages. They're not writing them. But so the groundhog is our messenger, whether it's literally looking at the tree imagery that's more common within Norse, or whether it's looking at this burrow concept that we see within our folk culture. But this is where Groundhog Day comes from. And everybody looks at that holiday and kind of snickers. Okay, I'm sorry, but Punxsutawney Phil vindicated himself. It got warm just before, but okay. So many of you probably heard me say this before, but there's a real story behind Groundhog Day. It's much better than the Punxsutawney Phil story. And it is this otherworldly messenger thing. primarily the Pennsylvania Dutch are an agricultural people. And so for agricultural people, what is one of the biggest questions they would want to know the answer to? When can I plant? Okay? But that's not all the groundhog is historically, charged with knowing. It'll bring messages back about famine, death, plague, or bumper crops, or anything that is bringing in ostensibly from Himmelgegen, where the ancestors are feeding it information and sending warnings down and telling them what to watch out for. And if you ever, we have these groundhog lodges. Okay, on February 2nd, there's like 20-some lodges throughout eastern Pennsylvania, and they all get together and have this groundhog day dinner. And the one I belong to, they wheel out this giant groundhog. He's like 8 feet tall, and he has a crown on his head, and he sits there and spews out all this information. And it's not just about the growing, but it's a lot of this is like a humorous thing. Some of it kind of annoying, like when one of the groundhogs started predicting the relationship between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. That's keep that pop culture stuff. But it's symbolic of something that our ancestors did and continue to do, which is you watch the behavior of the animals around you, and that gives you an indicator of what the winter is. I mean, I think that those of you who are my Facebook, what? Caterpillars is one, but for me, the real telltale is when the peewees come back. Like some of you who are my Facebook friend may have seen me type, "Well, peewees are back," and because when I have never known spring not to be like practically imminent when the peewees show up and start calling in the bushes. And peewees, if you don't know, are like a little bird. They look kind of like a titmouse, but they don't have quite the crest. So we watch and the caterpillars, predicting what your winter is going to be like. Foxes, what's winter going to be like based on their denning procedures. And bears, the whole song, "The Bear Went Over the Mountain," to see what he could see is all about whether the bear sees snow on the tops of the mountains and goes back to hibernate, or whether or not he sees that it's springtime and comes out. So a lot of this is about a relationship, among the plants and animals. But here we got our messenger running up and down the world tree, or the world burrow in this case, bringing information along. All right, that's all I pretty much have. I don't know what time-wise going on.
4:45.
And what time is it to be done?
5.
Okay, good. So we have any questions? Let's get the questions and answer.
Has anyone ever, like, as anyone you've talked to, or you all, from what you can say, anyone ever followed the groundhog and found out that different places the holes may come up? Can they come up at other trees?
That's a good question. I've never actually asked that question of anybody. But you know what? I think that might become a light purpose.
So, the symbol of the ermine stool just
Yes.
came up, and I wanted to know, how are they similar to the tree of life?
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. The ermine soul, the actual meaning of the ermine soul is kind of clouded in history, but most of us do believe that it's like a pillar of the world core of the world tree. It doesn't really look like it. Well, actually, the way this is part, it kind of does, really. I've been to the Hexerei in Germany, where that's where the ermine soul's image appears, being bent underneath the people who are taking Christ off the cross. And some people look at that as being a representation of the Christianization of the Germanic people. I also every year I get very upset as we get close to St. Funny Faith and St. Boniface's Day, where he had chopped down the doors oak among the Saxons, and which was also considered to be a personification of the world tree. What exactly and to whom exactly the ermine soul was held sacred is really not known. From our perspective, we actually associate it with sea and as being the world tree, but so the pillars upon which the skies rest.
But that will call them.
But the world pillar, yeah. But that pillar is also representative of the world tree, but it doesn't look the same. So, you know, if I had to wager, I would actually, I'm more comfortable with the pillar, to be honest, because it doesn't look like the tree to me. But other people's mileage may definitely vary on that one. But I see the world tree as
It's
one.
one where the Moors, I think because of like the destruction of the Christian era, I think like.
The lore's not clear, because there's something, Sax Node, Siu, Donor, and Buddha, they're all held by different people as being the god associated with the Irminsul. But I mean, to me, the Irminsul has come to represent Germanic heathenry in whatever flavor it is. And we do use the Irminsul in that manner. To me, it represents the columns of word, and I do associate it with Siu. So do you have any thoughts on that yourself?
Well, I recognize the similarity between that and the bishop's crozier that comes up, splits into two snakes. And as someone pointed out today about it becoming duality, that was singular, the support, the pole, except lightning like stark oak tree, you know, which created that duality. That really seemed to.
It's an interesting concept. I have to think about that one. But yeah, I see the world tree as a different living, vibrant entity personally. I see it as the column. I can understand why, and sometimes for simplicity's sake, I may say it represents the world tree to us. But it really represents the column of which existence is.
I sometimes see it, I don't know where I've seen it, there's like this world axis or something, and it's like, it's actually, I've seen it in like different science things where it's like, there's this column that goes up and it splits like this on both top and bottom, and it's like something about hemispheres and all that kind of stuff, and it's like, I've seen it in science and it just always dings me, it's like, wow.
So it kind of makes you think about that. I think that Irminsul thing is going to be a mystery for quite some time because we know it's there, we know it exists, but what exactly represents it is not fully known. Eric?
So, two related questions. When you talk about this image of the tree,
Yeah.
and the people that you talk to, your informants,
Yes.
are they pointing to an actual image, or is this only an oral tradition passed down?
It's oral tradition.
So they talk about this thing, but nobody has a drawing.
Well, we drew it. And
Well,
I've had other people draw it before, yes. Like other people have drawn it. And as a matter of fact, I've had people sketch it out for me while they're talking to me. But there's no like, you know, definitive drawing of it anywhere.
When you mentioned the hex symbol.
A hex sign, yeah. There's a hex sign.
It's much more commercial type thing.
Yeah, it's much more commercial, but it still has 12 other smaller hex signs around the tree.
So related to that, so when you're talking with the informants and they have this knowledge and they're drawing it, where did they get that from? Who do they say it came from?
From their mentors.
And
Their mentor. Yeah, it always comes from the mentor.
I'm surprised there's not like a children's book there where they write it down and share it with their
Well,
kids.
the thing is,
Versus only an adult.
no, you have to remember, especially in Hexerei, this stuff's underground. They were considered Satanists
Right.
and evil.
Okay.
Braucherei is a little bit more open about it, but nobody ever really. I have seen people kind of like do like circles, or they'll draw circles and relate that, but you know.
So they're keeping it secret.
This is the charge of our generation. This needs to be our generation's contribution. Unfortunately, not it, because if you ever seen me draw, if I drew that, I'd wipe out all existence.
There's something to be said for, there's certainly absolutely historical value and context in the narrative of Christianity supplanting and subverting or breaking these traditions. But in some cases, it's simply more convenient for practitioners in different places to just pass as Christian.
Yeah, oh, that's definitely the case.
Sure.
With
You know, in Iceland, it was a business venture. It is more convenient.
Yes.
In many ways. And so there was maybe not necessarily, we wouldn't put it down in a kid's book,
Right.
because that's just a little too on the nose.
But the other thing
These
is
are
also,
more stealthy approach.
the other thing is also, and you know, I read this I think it was Haldeman. One of the Deitsch historians actually had pointed out that, you know, that which used to be sacred oftentimes ends up becoming children's remnants in children's tales. Like, you know, and he was pointing out specifically the eeny, meeny, miny, mo cow. He said that's actually, if you look at it, somebody's the priest, and they're making these decisions about the fate of somebody else. He said it's a microcosm of the, you know, of various ritual actions boiled down into something that's consumed by children. And then you end up with one person who, in English you call the it, we call the boots, and who is now othered, you know, from, it's like there's all sorts of symbolism even in many of the children's games. And so, you know, I can't recall anything ever specifically referring to the World Tree before when I was a kid or anything like that. But again, you know, if any of you, well, John, you were there, and Stacy, you were there, and Leo, you were there at Andres's talk, when he was talking about how in Europe even now there's these pockets of people who are still practicing the old ways, you know, but they always had to do it kind of within their own community. That's exactly how Braucherei and Hexerei survived. It was happening, they were staying alive over there else, but they split as soon as they got a chance, came over here, is a lot safer. But Hexerei was always much, you know, much more difficult place because of the fact that they were not so actively calling upon God and Jesus to do the healing, but instead were, you know, either calling upon nature, their own wit, or these old helpful entities, which we now know as gods. So, anything else?
You might have discussed this previously. How are you supposed to read it?
That one's a very, very bizarre, and I know I was hoping that somebody was going to ask this question when I was talking about the new souls.
What was the question?
How are new souls created? New souls are supposed to be created out of the mega that exists from the eastern leaves. But how does it get down to the Dunkelgagen or the Urglaawe? We don't know. But there is absolutely no question in the practitioner's mind that this is still happening, because we are getting more and more people alive all the time.
On that note.
But I would bring the elements to that too. I would say souls start with light, and I think it's a combination of light, water, yeast. Like they're the basis of the metaphoric elements.
Oh, we're bread. That's awesome.
Sourdough starter.
Yeah.
Permanent.
On that note,